We have a wild New York Rangers trade update to go over today, as a new report has revealed the Rangers are trading a fan favorite in return for a player in a position of need. And we also have multiple other surprising Rangers updates to go over today in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with this New York Rangers team throughout the season, through the trade deadline, and into the playoffs, hopefully a playoff push, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, a new article dropped, pretty shocking stuff, honestly. It surprised me, from Peter Baugh and Arthur Staple in The Athletic. And, some of the details of this trade surprised me. Some of them do make sense, and we're going to break it down. Again, this article dropped just yesterday, what we know and what we think about the Rangers at the Four Nations face-off break. And some of the details are pretty crazy. Like, the Bruins are muddling along in the same vicinity as the Rangers, which is true. They're kind of on the down. I feel like the Rangers are kind of coming up. And a couple of UFA forwards who might fit the Drury mode: Trent Frederic and Justin Brazeau. Now, this is very interesting in and of itself. Brazeau, we're not going to touch on too much in this video, but just for some background, he's a huge, I think he's like 6'9" or 6'8", fourth line winger who scores. He scored, I think, 60 goals or 55 goals, something like that, in the OHL one year. So he is naturally a goal scorer. Hasn't really translated to the NHL level, but what has translated is his size. So he's a guy that the Rangers could use, but at the same time, to keep in mind, you have Adam Enstrom, who's a big guy as well on the fourth line. You also have Matt Rempe. So do you want to add another guy like that? Not sure that makes too much sense. Trent Frederic, on the other hand, makes a ton of sense for the New York Rangers. But we'll get to that in a second. Neither would be earth-shattering or shaking additions. Through the prices are still higher than you'd like, but that's two sizable players with some skill to provide depth behind the New York Rangers top six. Now, who would go back the other way, right? There's been some speculation, maybe Lindgren and Smith. I don't think that the Boston Bruins would have too much interest in that. Now, they are speculating here that if the Rangers were willing to let Brennan Othmann go, they might even convince the Bruins to take Chris Kreider, since surely Boston is a place Kreider doesn't have on his 15-team no trade list. So that's another thing to keep in mind at this trade deadline. If they want to move off certain guys, a lot of them do have no trade lists or no trade clause or no movement clauses, which hasn't stopped Chris Drury in the past. And I say the past, but 2 months ago, right, with Jacob Trouba. So it is definitely still possible. But to me, the most interesting part is you're throwing, and I think this tweet kind of sums it up perfectly, you're throwing Brennan Othmann in a trade to the Boston Bruins as a sweetener to take Chris Kreider. When Chris Kreider's healthy and playing good, why would you have to throw a sweetener in a trade for Chris Kreider? That doesn't make sense. Although I do think that the asking price for Trent Frederic at this year's trade deadline is going to be absurd, because a lot of teams want a third line center, and it could make sense for the Rangers long term, but giving up on Brennan Othmann, I'm not too sure. We'll get to Brennan Othmann in a second. Now, Trent Frederic makes a ton of sense for the New York Rangers. He can come in, he can be a third line center, like I said. He's still relatively young. Well, I say relatively young. He's only 27, right? He's still got a lot of hockey to go. He only makes $2.3 million this year. And if you take a look at his projected salary, again, this is just projected based on this model with some comparables. Sean Corrali, for one, who I think is a pretty good comparable. He is projected, and the most probable cap hit right now is $2.2 million. I think it's going to be much higher than that. It's probably going to be, like if you look at his cap hit right now, it's 2.3, right? So 2.2 doesn't make much sense. I think it's probably going to be like closer to 3 million or something like that, right? For a couple of years. So again, I think you can fit that in the cap if he's your third line center. This guy is a pest. This is something that, JT Miller has brought to the team that the Rangers need more of. So I like this player. This would actually be a good trade in that way, where again, he's 27. He's adding something to your team that you don't have much of. And, I think a lot of you are probably looking at your TV screens or your phone screen or whatever right now and going like, what are you talking about? We need to keep Kreider. We need the scoring. How much scoring does Kreider add to the team? Not much this year, and he's declining, and he's hurt, right? So that's something to keep in mind. You can trade him away in return for a player like Trent Frederic, who's going to come in and make an immediate impact on your third line and add something to your team that you need more of, right? The only thing to me is trading off of Brennan Othmann. I think that maybe it might be too soon for that, but again, let's take a look at the stats real quick. You have Trent Frederic here, who is a -13. That's what jumps off the page at me, first of all. But again, I don't put too much into plus minus, especially on teams that are not performing well. But he's a big third line center. He just turned 27. You could still have him for, a lot of years. He's not going to chip in for too many points, right? 15 points in 55 games, but he's responsible defensively. He's a pest to play against. And again, I think that the Rangers could use more of a player like this. So it does make sense in that way to me. And again, if you look at projected salary, just based on this model, it's not going to cost you a lot long term. I don't think it's exactly 2.2 million. Doesn't make sense for him to take less money than what he's making now, but I do think it's going to be somewhere close to 3 million probably. So could be very interesting. Now in that trade, and again, the point I wanted to make earlier is Chris Kreider out, yes, scoring out the door if you want to put it that way. You have guys in the minor league that are supposed to come up and make a difference, like Brendan Othmann, like Brett Berard. We've seen flashes of it who can come up and make a difference. The Rangers have such a terrible time developing players, right? That is another issue. These are the guys who are supposed to come up when a Chris Kreider goes out the door to fill in a need, like bringing in a Trent Frederic, for example, who can play on your third line. So anyway, I think it could be an interesting trade, and it would fill a position of need for the New York Rangers. But Brendan Othmann, I'm not too sure to move off of him yet, and we have some interesting quotes from him. And Vince Mercogliano is back, and he said, I spoke with a handful of New York Rangers prospects following today's AHL Hartford practice, and he said he was going to break them down into a few stories, and here's one of them from today's convo in Hartford with New York Rangers prospect Brendan Othmann on dealing with the most severe injury of his young career. And this is something that I think a lot of people have forgotten. Yes, Brendan Othmann was supposed to come up and make an impact. He didn't make the team. Adam Edstrom made the team pretty much over him to start the year, which was fine because I was like, you know what, Brendan Othmann's going to find his way back to the NHL at some point during the season. And then he got severely injured. He missed like a significant amount of time. And he said it's something that I couldn't really control at the time. I was hurt. I can't really sit there and say, why am I not up there? Why am I not getting a chance at the NHL level? And you know what? Whoever got called up at that time, whether it was Matt Rempe, Brett Berard at the time, did a great job. Both of them fit in really well, and I'm happy for both of them. That's a great attitude, right? He knows that his time is going to come, and it wasn't his time at the start of this season because of the injury that he sustained. And we have a more elaborate quote from Brendan Othmann as well. It was a long 10 weeks, he said. It was a grind. I was in the gym. I was on the ice just staying in shape and getting ready for when I was ready to come back. It was really tough towards the end because the first 6 weeks, you can't play, he added. But once you kind of get close to that week-to-week thing, you want to play and you want to get in there. Just knowing that and watching the games is tough, but I took a Christmas break and went home to see the family. After that, came back, reevaluated everything, and was good to go. So as soon, he hasn't played that much this season. I feel like, this is a guy that Rangers fans shouldn't really give up on yet. And again, using him as a sweetener in a trade like that is a little bit ridiculous to me. I don't think he's the name. I think there's maybe another prospect maybe you could throw in there. I think this is a guy you shouldn't give up yet. I think he's a lot closer to the NHL level than people actually realize. I think he can make a difference at some point, and we know his scoring ability when he's healthy, right? The latest example came last Saturday in a 4-2 win. He was skating, and this is a quote from Hartford's coach. He was skating. He was inside the dots. He was competitive. Every time that he went over the boards, it was like something was happening. That's the stuff we're going to look at and look for because guys have that ability. They're going to find a way to score. So, and then he went on to say, are you doing all the other things? That's growth for us. So I think that he is. I think that he's trying to work on other parts of his game, and obviously the scoring is there, especially at the AHL level, right? But he was hurt this year. So again, I wouldn't be too quick to give up on him. I do recognize that the Rangers have a awful problem developing players, so maybe he might be used as a sweetener in a trade like this. I wouldn't be too quick to use him, maybe a draft pick or something like that. But I do think, a Chris Kreider trade, I'm not sure why the Bruins would be too interested in that at this time. Maybe because the contract's not that much, and obviously they want to make a push for the playoffs still as well, but I'm not sure why, the Bruins would be too interested in that at this time, but it could make a lot of sense for the New York Rangers to take on Trent Frederic and re-sign him. I know he's a UFA this year, but he can help you push for the playoffs this year, and going forward, you can re-sign him. It's not going to be something crazy contract or anything like that, like $5 million, $6 million. You can easily re-sign him, and he's somebody that brings more of what JT Miller brings to the team. You need more guys like that on the roster, and again, responsible defensively. I think the Rangers could use more of that. But let me know in the comments what you think of that potential trade. I think that I would probably do it, but I wouldn't be so quick to give up on Brendan Othmann yet. I would rather put in a draft pick there, maybe something else. Let me know what you think, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.